At the celebration, a lavish banquet was taking place and a peculiar girl attended. The guests immediately started mocking her, as if they didn't even know which family she came from. Nevertheless, she wore a very old-fashioned dress for the banquet of the National Fund. The girl headed straight to the host of the house and officially introduced herself as the Duchess Cayenne Wintle. Her name was Atisha Hines from the eponymous Viscounty, likely unheard of by many, as they were partially Westerners. But the man assured that he knew about their Viscounty and was ready to listen to the conversation. However, the heroine asked him to leave and talk on the balcony. They went there, left alone, and then the conversation should have started, but the girl was very nervous as she didn't know where to begin. Finally, gathering her thoughts, she stated that in a year she might die, but no response was heard. Now she understood the gravity of the situation, as she could be detained due to suspicion of hidden motives, but there was no other choice. Therefore, Atisha claimed that she knew about the Duke having a secret child. At that moment, the aristocrat frowned and asked what the problem was. This reaction somewhat frightened the heroine. She realized she was saying quite unexpected things, but it needed to be finished before the arrival of her sister. The girl noticed that the aristocrat needed a fake fiancé, a woman who would fill the empty space and she could fill it. Like the air that disappears when the right time comes for the Duke and for his secret lover. He needed someone who wouldn't create problems, and Atisha was ready to live as if she didn't exist, then quietly leave. After her death, no one would pressure him to marry another girl. The Duke had no reason to listen to her like this, as playing with other people's lives didn't bring him pleasure. Therefore, this dialogue could be avoided. The girl also mentioned rumors circulating that Cayenne valued his secret lover. Even if he married, the title of Duchess could be obtained, but not that of a wife. The whole capital knew about it, and in her opinion, it was like playing with people's lives. The man explained that it was called aristocratic marriages, but she already knew that. That's why she was proposing it now. In the end, she would still die, and Cayenne wouldn't have to worry about her. All that needed to be done was to marry her. Before her death, even if only for a year, she wished to escape from her Hines family, including her father, stepmother, and older sister, and live the rest of her life in comfort. So now Atisha was ready to plead with him to do it, to take her with him to the north. After considering these words for a moment, the Duke directly asked if she was terminally ill and received confirmation that she was already in the third stage. Mentally, the girl realized how strange it was that a stranger, whom he saw for the first time, was suddenly asking for such a thing. But there was nothing to regret now, and all that remained was to hope for the best. In the end, the aristocrat acknowledged her correctness. His family indeed pressured the man to get married, but he never desired a wife for himself. Therefore, he didn't consider her proposal a bad idea. No emotions were necessary for a contractual marriage agreed upon by both parties, ensuring that no problems would arise. The man asked for her hand, and when it happened, he placed a ring on her finger. The heroine recognized the Duke Wintle's emblem perfectly fitted to her finger. Such a gesture touched the girl, and she simply expressed her gratitude, assuring him that she would make sure he never regretted this marriage. Not long ago, the heroine gathered her family for a serious conversation. Her stepmother, named Dorothea, was upset that she was taken away from her affairs and questioned why she needed them. She argued that if there was nothing important, she could handle it herself. However, the girl didn't listen and revealed that a few days ago, the doctor diagnosed her with hypermania syndrome, an incurable condition. Her half-sister Larian didn't know what it was, but the stepmother explained that it was a disease where mana accumulated inside the body, and in the case of a woman, her body could explode. Atisha confirmed this, stating that the doctor said she was already in the third stage with only a year left to live. She didn't know what to do. As expected, there was no sudden outpouring of sympathy from the family. The stepmother declared that by her 20th birthday, she should exert maximum effort. The father commented that he was very scared because they didn't know when Atisha might explode. The sister supported this, advising her not to leave the room to avoid an explosion. After saying this, they gathered to leave, upset that they were called for various nonsense. The heroine was left alone with her tears, abandoned by those who called themselves her family. She thought she was very strange because she was slow and couldn't understand why she wasn't receiving love. She believed it was her fault. However, it wasn't her fault. Her father, stepmother, and sister simply didn't love her for no apparent reason. When this realization hit, it became clear that she had no family. Because she disclosed her illness, she was forbidden from leaving the estate. Therefore, she could only sadly observe the bustling life outside. But one day, she overheard the maids talking as if Duke Kayane Wintle was seeking a wife. However, rumors circulated that the aristocrat had a beloved lover, making it all very strange. The heroine understood that death would be the same everywhere. In this case, she wished to leave this family and try to live a little for herself. That's why she approached the Duke, and as soon as she got his consent, she immediately requested to announce the wedding as soon as possible while the banquet was still ongoing. With these actions, she explained that she wanted to travel to the north as soon as the banquet ended. In reality, for nobles equated to dukes, it was customary to first announce the engagement and then the wedding. If an aristocrat were to suddenly announce the wedding, it would be a good opportunity to stir up a scandal about a hasty marriage. The girl was no longer afraid of losing her honor, but still worried about the reputation of her betrothed. Once she fully grasped her request, she immediately assured that if it was too unexpected, they could initially agree on the engagement and then explain the entire situation to the lover. The man took the heroine by the hand and quietly stated that she now wore the Wintle ring, and he would do anything she desired because she was now the Duchess. Previously, she had heard that the Duke of the North was known as a ruthless and harsh war hero. Rumors also suggested he had a dreadful and cold character. But now he seemed very kind, either genuinely or merely putting on a facade for his temporary wife, or perhaps it was just pity. In reality, whether it was politeness towards her or pity, it was no longer important to her. She wasn't interested. Therefore, she asserted that she would like to announce it on the last day of the banquet, and she received approval. As they returned, the nobles began to speculate on what she might have discussed with the Duke privately. One suggested that maybe she intended to marry the Duke, but it was hard to believe, given she was the second daughter. Just as they began to talk about them, the first daughter, along with the heroine's sister, entered the room. As soon as they exchanged glances, Lorien started shouting at her younger sister, accusing her of stealing her banquet invitation, causing the delay. The heroine affirmed that she came with her own invitation, on which their surname was written, so she hadn't taken anything. However, at that moment, the sister grabbed her hands and declared that everything belonging to their family now belonged to her. Atisha also belonged to the family, so she was considered Lorien's property. Now Lorien wanted to remind her not to leave her room. However, Atisha, who was never interested in such banquets, still attended. The sister recalled that every day she bought her toys so she wouldn't feel sad. She even sang songs for her. Perhaps this was because the heroine didn't receive a doll. When they were very young, Lorien loved dressing up her younger sister in cute outfits and showing her in the mirror. But one day, the little girl asked for permission to show herself to their parents because she felt very pretty. However, Lorien seemed against it. On that day, she took scissors and cut Atisha's long hair, stating that she shouldn't talk like that because she was just a doll. Lorien was a very malicious person to an extent, but it seemed she didn't even realize it herself. If she liked something, she got it, but if she disliked something, she tore it into pieces. Initially, everyone condemned her actions, but then everything changed. Later, people treated her misdeeds as innocent pranks, even expecting Lorien to do something amusing to have a good laugh together. Eventually, she received love regardless of her actions. The girl was very beautiful, but Atisha found her more annoying than anyone else. Throughout her life, she told her younger sister that she was merely her doll, and others would never see her. Now, the heroine became curious about whether her sister could still play with dolls and didn't even know when it might happen, making her fearful. Lorien angrily confirmed that it was indeed frightening, and Atisha needed to return to the estate immediately, stay at home, and not show herself again. Typically, in such situations, she could only listen to her sister Lorien because Atisha, being an obedient girl, was very timid and weak. She couldn't say anything against it, that was always the case. However, not this time. Breaking free from her sister's grip, the heroine declared that she had no intention of going back and would stay at the banquet. If Lorien didn't want to see her here, she could always go back home. The elder one, with restrained anger, asked for a repetition, adding that Lorien should go home not only today but every day until the National Fund banquet concludes, as Atisha will be coming here daily. The sister couldn't tolerate this and silently took her hand again, gearing up for a strike. However, the blow never came. At the last moment, the Duke himself intervened, grabbing Lorien's hand and inquiring about the situation. The man directly asked if they in their family didn't value education, as he couldn't believe they practiced violence, resembling more of what happened in the valley. Larian was shocked by what was happening. Introducing herself to the aristocrat, she asked him to let go, and he agreed, assuring that there wouldn't be a second time. The girl asked uncertainly what he meant, and he, with a cold expression, stated that if she raised her hand against Lady Atisha again, she wouldn't go unpunished. After that, he turned to the heroine, asked if she was okay, and upon confirmation, inquired if this was happening all the time, and if that's why she asked to be taken to the north. It was horrifying. As soon as he said this, there was a commotion in the hall, and Larian herself angrily demanded answers from her sister about how she dared to go somewhere. Atisha explained that it was a personal matter between her and Duke Wintle, and she didn't need Larian. However, Larian thought otherwise and questioned since when she even knew Duke Wintle. Looking at her future fiancé now, she didn't think he would marry her, a lady from a family that behaved so poorly. Meanwhile, the Duke declared that he had decided to announce their marriage right now instead of on the last day of the banquet. The first to fall into deep shock was, of course, the sister. However, no one listened to her anymore, and all attention was focused on the Duke. He displayed the family ring on Atisha's finger and began stating that she would become his wife, taking on the name Wintle. Anyone daring to tarnish her reputation would also tarnish his own. It was his eternal promise, a vow made before the Lord. Larian refused to believe her ears that Atisha was marrying the Duke, especially since her condition couldn't be considered normal. She was unwell. At that moment, the heroine became frightened because her sister could reveal Atisha's hypermania syndrome to everyone. If the public learned the truth that the new Duchess Wintle was incurably ill, it's likely that the Duke's vassals would insist on him marrying another girl. Atisha quietly turned to her sister and announced that she would become the Duchess and therefore she would leave home. However, her sister didn't share this view. She insisted that Atisha made the wrong choice, emphasizing her illness. It was not normal, and something must be wrong with her head. Atisha didn't understand what was happening, but Larian was already playing to the audience. She started demonstratively sympathizing with her sister, assuring everyone that she was a poor, simple-minded child. The girl couldn't just wait and watch. The younger one knew she was supposed to stay in her room, and that was frightening. It seemed like she was abnormal. But Cayenne intervened once again, stating that the only abnormal person present was Larian. Atisha had made it clear that she intended to become Duchess Wintle. From this day forward, tarnishing Atisha's reputation meant challenging the Duke himself. He promptly ordered her to leave. Larian still couldn't believe what she was hearing, but the Duke reiterated his command. He added that she should think about her behavior in the estate until the end of the banquet, and until he, with his future wife, returned to the north. He didn't even want to see her. In desperation, the sister turned to the younger one, suggesting they go back to the estate. This time they could play with dolls together. Atisha was scared and couldn't respond. The Duke noticed she didn't look well and suggested she go and rest. Taking her hand, they left the hall, leaving Larian embarrassed. Returning to her room, the heroine sank onto the couch, contemplating the repercussions of tonight's events. Her sister would undoubtedly report everything to their parents. With 2 days remaining until the end of the banquet, there was a chance her father might resort to the cane again. When the Duke entered, she explained that she had a heated argument with her sister, and it might cause trouble for him. However, Cayenne had a different perspective. He assured her that when she returned to the ballroom, everyone would forget what happened, offering their blessings. He insisted she should understand this despite his brusqueness, as he rushed into announcing their wedding. The girl contested this, as it wasn't rudeness but his assistance. After reflecting on his words, the aristocrat declared that he did it not to help her, but to preserve the honor and dignity of the Wintle family as its head. The reason didn't matter to her. The fact of receiving assistance meant a lot. She felt the support she had been given. In reality, it was the first time someone put Larian in her place. The feeling the heroine currently experienced was challenging to express in words. Indeed, Cayenne could understand this, but he still asked about her plans for the future. However, the heroine herself didn't know yet, as they would head to the north after the banquet concluded. In reality, the Duke was referring to plans for the evening, and whether she intended to return to the family estate or go with him. The Duke assumed she didn't want to see her family, and he was correct. Therefore, as they traveled north, he formally invited the girl to his villa in the capital. Finally, they had officially announced the wedding, so there shouldn't be any scandals about them being together for the next 2 days. In reality, she couldn't anticipate the Duke being so considerate. The only thing she could do was die quickly, so she had to decline the proposal. She simply couldn't act otherwise. Cayenne, despite the refusal, stated that she was his partner, and he made the offer because he was concerned she might suffer after being in her family's estate. These words resonated in her mind, and the Duke repeated his proposal. This time he received consent and gratitude, although he didn't need words of gratitude since he did it not to help her. With a warm smile, Atisha pointed out that the Duke said it again. Even if he didn't intend to assist her, the girl still received help, and therefore she should genuinely thank him. As soon as the father learned the news, he was incredibly furious. He couldn't believe it because Atisha had no talents to become a duchess. His wife noticed that people were saying the Duke had a lover, but nevertheless he decided to marry without the family's consent. Larian intervened at this moment, nervously asking with a smile whether Atisha couldn't just get married, as she should return to her back to their home. The mother confirmed this, stating that if they gave her away, no family would want to take her, as she was a complete zero in everything. Suddenly, an interesting thought occurred to the father. It might be better not to interfere with their wedding at all. If she did marry the Duke Wintle, they would have connections, and they could expand their business all the way to the north, even building new roads there. Larian was outraged, but the Duke had no intention of retracting his words, as it was a unique opportunity. However, the daughter insisted because Atisha was soon to die due to her illness. In that case, something might happen at the banquet. But it only meant that they needed to send the girl to the north as quickly as possible. If they managed, the incident would occur precisely in the north. They could simply pretend not to know about her illness. It was a perfect plan considering the person who diagnosed her disease was their family doctor. If they kept him quiet, there would be nothing to worry about. In the end, they had little time left before Atisha's death, so they needed to negotiate with the Wintle family that they would handle everything themselves. However, Larian, already in hysteria, began to declare that she did not want this and did not wish for Atisha to become a Wintle. She believed Atisha should be confined to their home, and her mother echoed the same sentiments. But the woman was primarily concerned about the dowry. If Atisha married the Duke, they would have to pay a huge sum as a dowry. Yet, in reality, the father had already calculated everything. Finally, Atisha and her betrothed traveled by carriage to his home. Still, she couldn't believe she was now in the same carriage with the Duke, whom she had met literally yesterday. Now the girl could feel the beautiful sensation of being free for the first time in a long while. Looking at the aristocrat, she understood that he was indeed handsome. After all, the Duke Cayenne was considered the second most handsome man in the empire, which to her seemed wrong as the emperor should always come first. However, personally for her, the Duke was the most beautiful. The Duke and the Emperor had been close friends since childhood, as the ruler grew up in the north, not in the capital. Moreover, they fought together. Suddenly, Cayenne snapped her out of her thoughts, addressing her. This made the girl think that she had been staring at him too obviously. The Duke inquired about how well she handled the cold, as it was very cold in the north. Of course, this was known to everyone, but it was not a suitable place for the sick. Atisha confessed decisively that she did not tolerate the cold, but was willing to endure it. Therefore, there was no need to worry, especially during the journey to the north. She would not be a burden to him. Such a reaction somewhat surprised the aristocrat, but he did not comment on it. Instead, he explained that they would be far from here, and perhaps she had a close friend she would like to contact. But she admitted that she had no friends. If she talked to peers, her sister would intervene, standing between them and disrupting the conversation. Also, her sister constantly gossiped behind her back. What he asked the heroine about, something she hadn't even thought about, made her wonder if he really cared about her. The man had previously warned her that she might not like it in the north and asked if she wanted to go. Finally, the Duke decided to ask the last question to clarify things. Specifically, he wanted to know if she wanted to sever ties with her family, seek revenge, or at least receive an apology from them. Before the heroine could answer, the carriage suddenly braked, causing her to lurch forward towards the Duke. She immediately felt embarrassed and apologized. The Duke coldly stated that it was the driver's fault, so there was no need for her to apologize. He added that there would be a conversation with the driver when they arrived at the estate. Despite the cold tone, Atisha felt warmth from his embrace. Eventually, she refuted the blame, suggesting that the situation might be due to the road rather than the driver. Perhaps a stone got in the way, so there was no need to blame him. The aristocrat pointed out that Atisha was too kind, but the culprit should face the consequences and receive the necessary punishment regardless of who it might be. Somehow, when she heard the Duke use words like fault and punishment, they didn't seem directed at the driver. Now, being so close to him, she could feel his breath, and it seemed as if the girl understood his emotions, and they were intense. A burning, vengeful spirit hidden beneath an indifferent gaze, but it was unknown who he was truly seeking revenge on. Until now, she could do nothing, and leaving her own family required great courage from her, and she never once thought about revenge. Therefore, in response to the question that was asked before, Atisha stated that she was not sure. She didn't know what she really wanted from that family, she hadn't had time to think about it. But now she wanted to take some time to think about it. To begin with, she needed to sever any ties with them, and this answer was already enough for him. As soon as they arrived, the heroine could see the gigantic estate, much larger than she could have ever imagined. Cayenne explained that the emperor had gifted it to him, saying he was willing to give away the house to encourage him to visit the capital more often, but now it seemed like the house had caught Atisha's eye. Coming inside, the Duke remarked that she could have it if she liked or even take it. After a moment of considering these words, she sharply stated that such talk was unnecessary. She couldn't accept such a vast estate, especially one that was a gift from the emperor. In reality, the Duke didn't need this building. However, he couldn't simply dispose of this gift. A gift to his future duchess might be reason enough. Now she understood that it was about a wedding gift. Perhaps it was normal for the Duke to give estates as presents, but it would still revert to the owner once she passed away. The aristocrat announced that he would transfer the property rights documents tomorrow. They needed to stay here for some time before heading north, but then it would be entirely at her disposal. Nonetheless, the girl agreed to accept it, allowing the Duke to do as he pleased. It seemed better if she just stayed put. However, Atisha couldn't believe that such a grand estate would become hers. The Duke himself didn't seem impressed with the building. Duke Cayenne was always enigmatic, capable of decisive action, known as a ruthless monster on the battlefield, and incredibly unemotional. But the Duke she could observe now was quite different. While he might be unexpressive, he wasn't cold. It seemed the rumors about him were false. The man simply didn't express his thoughts and was prone to roughness. However, learning more about him revealed that he was very attentive. Reflecting on it now, the aristocrat had been very kind to the heroine from the beginning. Perhaps it was because she would become his fake duchess, or perhaps due to her imminent death. Nevertheless, he appeared to be a genuinely good person. Finally, the staff led the girl to her new room, and she immediately stepped onto the balcony, enjoying the beauty of the night sky, feeling like it all belonged to her now. She woke up very alert, and then there was a knock on the door. A maid named Marin introduced herself, bringing water for washing. The servant hurriedly approached the heroine, noting that she should hasten with washing, and then proceed to the guest room. As it turned out, the Duke had summoned designers, the most famous clothing designer in the capital, a jewelry designer, and a footwear designer, all waiting only for Mrs. Atisha. The heroine looked skeptically from behind the door to see her new designers, 3 in total. The first was in charge of clothing, named Vivian. The second, a jeweler named Lucy, and the third, responsible for footwear, was Nigel. These individuals had given numerous gifts to her sister, Larian, who had become the center of attention due to her antics and eventually became the muse for the designers. As a result, Larian ordered her younger sister to carry out her tasks. The more she ran around, the more they looked down on her, treating her as if she were her sister's servant, paying little attention. Today, however, her role was to play the Duchess of Wintle, and she couldn't allow herself to feel oppressed. As soon as she entered the room, she greeted them with a light smile and inquired about how they had been. From their reactions, it became clear that they hadn't heard the news about the wedding. They immediately began to gossip among themselves about why the heroine was here, speculating if she could be the Duke's lover. Atisha stated that she was told they were the Duke's guests and wanted to know what tasks he had assigned to them. However, she received no answer. Concluding that they probably had nothing to tell her, she decided to leave. Vivian stopped her, explaining that they had received a request from the Duke. He mentioned that he needed a dress, jewelry, and shoes for the banquet celebrating the founding of the state. The designers were now focused on fulfilling the Duke's request, no longer speculating about the heroine's presence. They understood that the Duke had turned to them specifically, yet he hadn't provided any specifics. Upon hearing this, Atisha took a cup of tea, sat on the sofa, and noticed that the aristocrat had prepared surprises. Finally, the heroine admitted that these items were needed for her, and tonight they would be required for her presence at the second-day banquet in honor of the founding of the state. Since she would be wearing it, it had to be a masterpiece worthy of the name Wintle. Nigel reassured, but if it had to be done by tonight, they simply wouldn't have enough time. In response, the future Duchess reminded them that they all had access to mana to expedite the process since mana enhanced the absorption of materials. Vivian, however, expressed outrage, stating that they couldn't use all their mana. If they took on this order, they wouldn't be able to take others for 3 months, and she would have to close her salons during that time. The heroine didn't want to hear that, so she turned directly to Vivian and asked if the Duke's request meant nothing to her. At that moment, she realized that she couldn't show any nerves under any circumstances. She had to keep herself composed because her role now was to impersonate the Duchess. The more she distracted people, the more satisfied the Duke would be. When she thought about how to be confident, her sister came to mind and how she used to yell at her, forcing her to go to work. It became clear that Atisha didn't want to be like that. The girl stated directly that she understood everything. It meant that designer Vivian was rejecting the order for the dress, so it was time to provide an answer to the other 2 designers. They still sat in silence, not believing she could truly be his lover. They thought she might have gotten a temporary stay in this mansion, but was now bluffing. Regardless, they were taking a significant risk, no matter what answer they gave. They weren't getting through, and Vivian directly asked about her relationship with the Duke. In response, the girl asserted that she was behaving disrespectfully since they couldn't ask personal questions to their clients. At that moment, the Duke knocked on the door, announcing his entrance. Immediately, all the designers stood up and greeted him in unison. The Duke explained his tardiness, mentioning that he was clarifying how land rights worked. As it turned out, the property rights to this villa were included in the price along with the rights to the adjacent land. The Duke asked her to place her hand on a special magical object, and as soon as she did, everything around lit up. After this, Cayenne declared that from this moment forward, she was the mistress of this villa. The present designers were quite shocked by this announcement, as it was too much for a lover. Suddenly, Lucy noticed a ring on the girl's finger and realized at that moment that she wasn't a lover, but the future Duchess. This information allowed the jeweler to step forward and bow, stating that she was glad to be given a chance. If they trusted her, they would create a true masterpiece, unlike anyone else in this world, worthy of the Wintle reputation. Nigel also bowed, affirming that even if he had to use all the materials he had stored, he would still make the most beautiful pair of shoes in the entire country. Vivian, on the other hand, fell to her knees, begging forgiveness for her rudeness. Instead, she promised to sew the best dress imaginable. The heroine felt uneasy about all this, and the aristocrat decided to address them all, stating that this was all for the joy of his wife. However, the lady did not seem pleased. The man asked his future wife not to listen to them, as there were plenty of designers in the country, and these could simply be sent back. However, Atisha unexpectedly asked him to wait with the decision. No matter how they treated her, if it became known that these designers lost the trust of Duke Cayenne, they would have to close their salons. Atisha found this consequence sufficient. The heroine noticed that he spent time selecting designers, so everything would be fine even if he didn't send them back. However, he arrived at the mansion empty-handed, and she needed something to wear. Having visited their salon several times, she felt confident in trusting them with her orders. The man eventually agreed, emphasizing that it didn't matter whether she needed to approach other designers. She could do whatever she pleased, and he was very grateful for that. After this, he warned that he needed to be away briefly and would return after lunch. Therefore, the selection of clothes would be left to his wife. Once the man left the room, the present designers anxiously awaited the Duchess's words. She simply gave them the choice of where to begin. The aristocrat left the mansion, and the words of gratitude from the bride lingered in his mind, even if he had no intention of helping. Now he understood that she was right. Although Cayenne had told her he wouldn't help, the truth was that he did help. It didn't matter if it was the hasty announcement of the wedding, the invitation to the mansion, or even the summoning of designers. All of it could be considered a normal treatment toward the future Duchess Wintle. As for everything else, it seems there was indeed something to be thankful for. However, in the end, he didn't want the girl to find out the meaning of that plaque until the very end, even if she learns why he is helping her. A carriage awaited the aristocrat, and in it was the assistant Val de Prame, who had studied the documents as instructed, especially the report on the investigation of the heroine's family, specifically Atisha. By now, he roughly understood the details: the Viscount who remarried, the portrait of the stepsister, a frail, lonely, and ordinary girl. What interested him further were the relationships those three designers had with the girl, and as it turned out, they were all close to Larian Hines. Every time visiting the salons, Larian used her sister as a spare model. To intentionally mock her, she sent the girl for orders several times when they weren't ready. There were days when she was even expelled from the salons. Atisha Hines, with her snow-white face and pink hair, was deeply surprising in her composure. Her life was filled with hatred and cruel treatment. However, when asked about revenge, she claimed she didn't have time to think about it. Perhaps she desired something, but that required time. Still, the Duke believed that once she became Duchess Wintle, she would surely make those who offended her apologize. She would likely seek ruthless vengeance, maybe leave the Viscountess Hines without a title and use family members who had become commoners as servants, so that no one would dare to look down on her. She would have the power to make them kneel before her. However, the girl claimed she hadn't even considered revenge, and Cayenne couldn't comprehend how that was possible, wondering if it was related to her incurable illness. If he only had 1 year left to live, they would certainly have a different choice. If she had known about the designers in advance, she would have definitely approached others. Finally, the aristocrat ordered the carriage to stop since he needed to visit the Emperor's palace. It had been a while since he last met with him. Noon arrived, and the heroine silently gazed out the window, ignoring the cooling tea on the table. Despite the servants offering her more, she declined. The only thing on her mind was where the Duke had disappeared. The man had left the estate early in the morning and had yet to return. They were supposed to go together to the banquet celebrating the founding of the state, but they didn't even have time for preparation. Suddenly, she realized that Cayenne could have gone to his lover. If he indeed came to the capital with his lover, it explained why the servants hadn't said anything. Ultimately, if it was the Duke's personal life, it had nothing to do with her. It was merely a marriage of convenience without any emotions, as she had promised. Dusk set in, and Atisha grew tired of waiting. Unconsciously, she fell asleep right at the table, but someone woke her, informing her that the man had returned. The heroine went to meet him. The Duke immediately apologized for the delay, but as soon as he saw his Duchess in the new attire, he was left speechless with admiration. Gathering his thoughts, the aristocrat inquired whether she had been expecting him, and he received confirmation. However, she also wanted to express her gratitude. Thanks to him, she now had a new dress, jewelry, and shoes. Finally, she possessed such beautiful attire for the first time. The man made no comment on it. Instead, he assessed her reaction, which seemed like happiness. It appeared that it didn't matter who had made them. Passing by Atisha, he affirmed that it suited her well. However, judging by his behavior, she concluded that he didn't really like it. But before leaving, he paused and declared that by midnight, he would find other designers. Now, the second day of the state founding banquet arrived. Aristocrats who missed the show a day earlier had only one question: would Lady Atisha truly become the Duchess of Wintle? The Duke was known to them as an unapproachable flower on the top of a snowy mountain. No one dared to climb it, and even if you did, survival was unlikely. However, this girl was spineless, weak, and not even beautiful. She was deemed the worst girl in the world, Atisha Heights. At that moment, the Viscount himself entered the hall, evidently pleased with the evening. The aristocrats exchanged glances as they realized that Larian truly didn't know about the wedding. However, the Viscount reacted differently. The woman decided to greet her father, noting that he would soon have a celebration. He confirmed it and added that Atisha seemed to have caught the Duke's attention. The attendees were shocked that the Viscount actually believed the Duke would marry. However, he joyfully insisted that it didn't matter how great a person was, he was still young, and that was wonderful. The Viscount continued to assure everyone present that the Duke was infatuated with his daughter, and it seemed like everyone bought into it. Suddenly, someone from the crowd inquired why Larian had reacted the way she did yesterday. Her father explained that his elder daughter was quite immature, and he had kept the wedding hidden from her to avoid jealousy towards her younger sister. The man continued his performance for the audience and noted that he was concerned about something. Specifically, the Duke had mentioned that he wouldn't accept any coins from the dowry. The news shocked everyone in the hall, but within seconds conversations started as if the Duke frequently defended Atisha, and it didn't seem like Wintle cared about a few coins in the dowry. However, the father helped calm the crowd by suggesting that this was love. He pointed out that the Duke probably believed love couldn't be bought with money. Yet, people couldn't believe they were talking about the same Duke who was infamous as a ruthless monster, the great Duke of the North, always leaving corpses wherever his sword went. Their reaction was exactly as he expected, but he needed to dignify himself. He declared that even in this case, they wouldn't tarnish the honor of the Hines family because they couldn't withhold anything. Nevertheless, the Duke remained very stubborn. The nobles fell for every word they heard, attempting to reassure that everything was fine. If the Duke spoke that way, there was nothing more to be done, as nobody wanted to offend him in any way. Finally, everything unfolded as planned, and now the Duke can't do anything against public opinion. He could argue that instead of a dowry, the Viscount would have to invest money in the northern trade business. This was termed the genius plan. Later, the main protagonists of the evening entered the hall, Duke Caen Wintle and Lady Atisha Hines. Those who had previously discussed how insignificant she was were now shocked. She was the precious gem that shone brighter than anything else in the room. Everyone was also enthralled by the craftsmanship displayed in her attire and jewelry. If they spent so much on her, it only meant that the Duke had indeed fallen in love with her. The Viscount met them with feigned happiness and headed towards his daughter, expressing joy for her. He lamented that he would have to let go of the daughter he raised, and thus he wanted to embrace her. However, the heroine still remembered too well what kind of person he was. The man had always been strict with her, a terrible father who never smiled at her or showed his tender side, only to her sister. Learning about her wedding, Atisha was convinced he would take her back to the estate, close her in, as that was how such a father wanted to celebrate her wedding. She understood that this couldn't be, and he couldn't easily deceive her now. After all, her father never loved her. The future Duchess distanced herself from her father's embrace and declared that he looked too happy. The man, with a slight nervousness, claimed not to understand what was going on since his daughter was getting married, and of course he was happy. However, the same daughter, in a cold tone, asked whether he was so happy because she was getting married specifically to Duke Caen. But if that wasn't the case, was he truly pleased because she was leaving home? In the end, her father had always tried to drive her away, wishing she would just die, and he never wanted to hear about her again. At this point, the Viscount began to panic, denying all these words, asking not to joke like that and not to sadden her father. Instead, he suggested embracing him. But she didn't come closer, and then the man had to resort to blackmail. He approached and whispered if she wasn't afraid that everyone around would find out about her illness. If the truth came out, her wedding could be jeopardized and the Duke could face problems. However, he didn't want that. It was necessary to maintain close relations with the Wintle family, so it was worth stopping the rebellion and pretending to approach to hug her father. Atisha realized that tomorrow would be the last day of the banquet and the day after she would leave for the north, so she needed to endure it as always. But that didn't happen. The Duke stood between them, Caen, asking what he was doing. The father nervously laughed, apologized, as he was so glad to see his daughter that he completely forgot to greet him. He asked for generosity and forgiveness for the sake of his daughter, because soon they would become relatives. However, the Duke already knew the man before him was a dreamer who didn't mind oppressing and using violence against the weak, but bowed before the strong. The Viscount suddenly asked to wait a bit because he and his daughter needed to talk about the wedding, specifically the dowry. But in reality, he intended to make the Duke yield to him. Before the serious conversation, Caen asked Atisha one last time if she still wanted to break all ties with the Hines family, and she assured him that her opinion would never change. Then the man turned to the Viscount, stating that their families shouldn't burden themselves with any concerns related to their marriage. From such a statement, the father was stunned. It could mean that the Duke heard everything he spoke to the aristocrats, but it was practically impossible for it to happen so quickly. In panic, quickly considering how to respond, the elderly man remarked that the Duke spoke as if he wouldn't accept any dowry, so they could set a wedding date as soon as possible. However, the groom reiterated his words that their family shouldn't worry about anything regarding their marriage because from this day forward, Lady Atisha renounced the Hines name. This meant she would have nothing to do with that family. At this moment, the mask that the Viscount had held throughout the evening began to crumble, and he, in desperation, didn't know what to do. Atisha was his daughter, and she had just casually severed all ties that bound them. Later, the butler introduced the last guest at the celebration, Lassies Ignivan, the current emperor, who remarked on how surprisingly noisy it had become. The ruler immediately headed toward his friend, noting that he was the last to learn about the duke's wedding. He became curious about how it all started, but he was asked to do what was necessary first. The bride's father approached the ruler, introducing himself as Veron from the Hines family. With a slight smile, the emperor apologized, acknowledging that he was the same person who dared to exclude his daughter from the family. However, the Viscount still didn't understand what was going on. Lassies then suggested that Duke Cayenne hadn't mentioned yet that he entrusted a part of the capital's territory to his wife. As was known, the title of the rulers of the capital's territories was given to those who inherited a new territory. In shock, the father began to stutter heavily, and then the emperor had to explain. The new title was not given to aristocrats who inherited family lands, but to those who inherited a new territory. This meant that the lady would no longer bear the Hines name. The ruler gave the final word to his friend, and now the duke spoke with the Viscount, explaining that Lady Atisha was now a baroness. Therefore, she was no longer associated with the Hines family, meaning there was no need to treat Wintle as relatives of the Hines family. Also, it was advisable not to have unnecessary expectations just because the daughter and the duke were getting married. Trying to threaten him would have consequences.